just housekeeping wise, help yourself to tea and coffee. There's no fire drill scheduled, so if the fire alarm goes off, very, very calmly walk down the stairs and please don't use the lift. Oh, fair dues. And yeah, it's dead casual, so if you've got any questions for Austin / Ryan, I've given away your secret already.
Oh man, I can never be a spy now, can I?
Then just chip in whenever you fancy, really.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to Austin for coming. If you don't know him, he writes under the pen name Ryan Stark. He's a local Worcestershire boy, and he's published 6 novels in 2 different series, and the latest one is An Invisible Murder, which is the 4th in his Daily and Whetstone detective series. Yeah, if you're interested in self-publishing at all, Austin's already done a brilliant talk for us, completely detailing, like start to finish, how to self-publish your own books for free using Amazon, and that's on YouTube. And we've got lots of other author talks coming up as well. We've got some little flyers over there if you're interested.
Do you write the sort of books that you write because that's what you like to read, or is it just your niche that you found and fit into?
It's more just a niche I found. I don't necessarily write what I read at all. At the moment, I'm reading books that have been published by friends and acquaintances to see what they're like, to see how good they are, to see how good I am. But a lot of that tends to fall in the detective crime fiction category or the crime fiction category.
A lot of self-publishing stuff seems to be very genre-y, doesn't it? It's like you don't get a lot of literary fiction self-published. Maybe because it doesn't sell very well. I don't think literary fiction sells very well, even through Penguin. You know what I mean?
I think I was about halfway through Unnatural Selection when I thought, this is great, this is fantastic. We can do detective fiction till the cows come home, because Daly and Whetstone will always have another dead body. There might be one in the disabled toilet upstairs if we're lucky.
There isn't, if anybody needs to use the toilet.
That's an in-joke that we've just had between us. But I thought, well, let's do something different. So I invented the Beckett character, and I thought, well, things are going on around the world that we as normal members of the public don't know about, and there are naughty things going on about the world. So who solves those problems? Who goes out and sorts it out? So Beckett's the guy. And that was a totally different genre, because there's the thing about police thrillers is they have an awful lot of procedural information behind them, which, although I tend to steer clear of actually saying what the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, Clause 6, Section 5, Paragraph 3, Bullet Point 4 says, I have to read it before I say anything so that it fits in with pace. With the international crime fiction, the gloves are off. You can do what you like, because that's the way it is.
Because it's all black ops stuff, and it's like the public will never know about it anyway, so you kind of...
I was saying to Martin earlier, what I'm trying to do at the moment, and failing dismally, is finding the name of a network of Department of Defense in America satellites that are still up in the air but not being used. And they don't tell you those things, so it's kind of hard to find those out. But it keeps me awake at night and keeps me doing this stuff. But you can't do that with the detective drama. They have to fit in with real life to a certain extent, and they have to fit in with the rules.
Have you had any police officers read your books and critique the procedures at all?
Yeah, I've had a couple. One said, I love the way you skirted round the caution that they read before an interview. I said, well, yeah, because I have only ever been in one interview situation where I've required a caution. And that was, we're not going to go into that. The point is, if you don't know enough, you're going to get caught out on it. So I basically say they got the preliminaries out the way and then carried on and pressed the button on the Neil tape recorder. They unwrap the tapes, put them in, that sort of thing. That's all I'll do. And I do know the caution. I've got it written on my iPhone, so if I wanted to, I could cut and paste it. But there's no, you know what it says, so why bother to put it in the book?
I'm very grateful after watching how many seasons of Line of Duty, where they go through every single step of it, and you're just like, come on, man, it's been 10 minutes, ask the questions.
It's a bit where they say something like, you're not obliged to say anything, and then you finish it off for them because they don't finish it themselves. And the wife looks over at you and says, are you stupid or what? But the key thing is not necessarily the police procedural stuff, it's all the other stuff that goes with it. And I was at a book fair, and I was doing a talk on taking a story from an idea through to the published work. And I had, I always forget his rank, but it was quite a high rank. A guy came over to me and says, you got that right? What was that I got right? Northern Irish accent. Got that right. Oh yeah, what was that then? He said, well, the one that doesn't know what he's talking about is always the one that's grumpy and getting in everybody's way. The ones that know what they're talking about barely say anything, they just get on with it. I said, that's insightful. How do you know that? He says, well, I'm in CID, in Belfast Police. I'm a detective superintendent or whatever it was. Okay, fair enough. I'll take that. So yeah, I have had police critique my books.
Would it sort of burn you if you were forced to write something a bit more cozy, a bit less procedural, or do you enjoy the systems of the investigation?
It wouldn't burn me at all so much. It's all about getting from A to B and going through A+1, A+2, A+3 and veering out to Z now and again. It's all about the structure of it. And I've got a guy who's just died by falling out of a window. And I haven't written the rest of the story yet because I want to make that less of a police crime fiction and more of a just people who come and clean the house or people who fix the car crime fiction. I'm not particularly wedded to the police. I'm not particularly wedded to our international crime fighting, whatever he is. I don't mind. What I like to do is I like to tell a story that pulls the rug out from under your feet 3/4 of the way through. And that's my key goal.
So how do you pitch the books to people? The two separate series. When you first meet someone, you're like, hello, I'm Ryan/Austin, depending on how honest you're being.
Let's get this out of the way. Ryan Stark is not my name. My name is Austin Gower. I was born at 52 Wordsworth Avenue, Redditch, in Headless Cross. I was actually born in the house. So I'm a Redditch born and bred. We moved away a bit, but Redditch born and bred. I chose Ryan Stark because of Austin Powers, Austin Minnie, Austin Morris. My dad's name's Austin, and I hated it. So I've chosen Ryan Stark as my pen name. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Did you have to do a lot of Googling around for just to check that there weren't any other Ryan Starks knocking about? There's a Martin Smith knocking about who's a weird, dead-eyed country music singer.
Yeah, I did. There's Ryan Stock, who is a jackass guy with his baseball cap on the wrong way around, doing stupid stuff. And that was the original name I chose. But when I saw he was doing that and he had videos of him falling over and hurting himself, I thought that's not what I want to be associated with. So
he's popular with 90s kids.
He's popular with 90s kids. So, sorry, what was the original question?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Stark came up in Game of Thrones as well, didn't it? After I'd chosen that name.
Oh, that's handy, though, because it's so sort of memorable.
Yeah. You can't remember the question, can you now?
How did you settle on Ryan Stark? Did you have to do a lot of... Obviously, you do lots of research when it comes to the writing and the publishing. If you've got any questions about publishing, there's nothing about self-publishing Austin doesn't know.
Everything on that table, bar the pen and the little wireframe under the business cards, I've created from scratch. I haven't brought any designers or anything in. It isn't that difficult if you know your way around a computer, which I do.
So how difficult was it to get Fuldean Press to take your
Shall I let you into a secret?
Is that you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're still self-published?
I'm still self-published, but when I go to people and say that I represent Fuldean Press, they look at me in a totally different light to when I say I'm self-published. And you would be surprised at the number of people out there who've got books who are in effect self-published. They hide it well. L.J. Ross is the famous one. Dark Skies Publishing is her and her husband. Yeah.
It's smart, isn't it? Because it's, I think the more you can do to make yourself look like Penguin on a shelf, the easier it is to convince people to pick you up. I don't think it really applies as much anymore, but there's always been a bit of a stigma with self-publishing. Maybe like 10 years ago, before, KDP and Kindle made it a lot easier to make something look professional. But now, your books on the shelf in the library look exactly the same as a James Patterson book. Do you know what I mean?
My books are in shops now, and they wouldn't be even as many as 5 years ago. No, that's just some guy writing stuff in his spare room. Well, yeah, it is actually, to be fair, but it doesn't mean to say it's some non-literate guy writing stuff. One of the advantages of having a career in IT is that I know my way around a computer. So when it comes to images like this one here, I can create an image like that one. So doing the graphics isn't a problem if you know somebody who can do graphics. The book itself, when we look inside the book, we've got things like the front matter at the front. Well, that's just writing, isn't it? And then we've got all the text, and that's just writing, isn't it? And a few pictures at the back. It's just pictures, isn't it? But the secret is, how do I then use my IT skills to put the right margins on, to put the headers and footers on? And that's as far as it goes. There is nothing overly complicated about it. There are people who don't use computers who would need a bit of tuition, a bit of training in how to do it. But it isn't like trying to get Apollo 13 back from the moon or anything like that.
Yeah, and you can literally just pick up a major published book off the shelf and be like, right, what have they put on page 1, 2, 3, 4? And then just copy it, and there's nothing you can't copy in Word, even to the point of, images and that sort of thing.
Here's a little job for you. Here's a little task for you. It's not going to be on every book. Obviously, HarperCollins and Penguin and so on, it's not going to be on every book. Look inside the back. If you see a barcode like that, it will tell you if it's printed by Amazon. And many of people who say they've got published books, they're printed in the same way that I print that.
So if you print yourself, do you always go straight to a paperback?
I've got ebooks and paperbacks. I could publish it in hardback. It would take that much effort to do that. I just haven't at the moment. But that might be my next step.
And does Amazon put it together for you in the in the cover and everything?
Yes, they do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you just have to provide the files for it, and as long as your files are correct, isn't it? They do a good job.
So we go in through our portal that we've set up. We say we want to create a book. So we press the big idiot button at the top that says create. It then presents us with a screen to put in what's called metadata. Metadata, data about data. So broadly speaking, that's the title, the edition, the date, a few keywords about it, the description that comes up when you go into Amazon, and loads of other things that you will know as you're going along. The next page is all about putting in your book, physical book. So you being you've created it in Word, or you've created it in things like Scrivener or Google Docs, and you've got all this formatting rubbish right. You've done all that. You press a button and create a PDF. Yeah. PDFs are everywhere now, so I don't need to describe what they are. But you create one of those, which is the entirety of every white page in between those covers. Okay? So it says, upload your PDF. You upload your PDF. It goes through a few checks. Make sure that it can't find any spelling mistakes, which is difficult when I'm writing in Portuguese in some of these. And then it says, upload your cover, please. Well, you've been clever. So you've got your graphics program and you've created one image which goes from there all the way around to there. You've used Amazon's provided template, so you know it's the right size, and you know that that bit's going to come somewhere near the middle of the spine, and you upload that. And it does a few checks, make sure it fits all right, tells you that it doesn't fit, so you adjust it. And then you press the button. It says, how much do you want people to pay for this? So you put all payment details in, press the button, and go. Now, if you've done your work right in this, You can do that in 25 minutes. And it costs...
How many copies do they do for you?
How many copies do you want?
Yeah.
So I have a special button because I've got that dashboard on my portal that says create some author copies, please. So these are all author copies. It means that I pay the print costs.
Right.
Okay, that allows me to have a bit of margin when I sell it. If one of you go onto Amazon and you press the button to buy it, I get less because they take some money and they will print that book specially for you.
Yeah, you don't have to buy, like 20 years ago, even 10 years ago,
Yeah.
you'd have had to order 1,000 copies and have them in your garage. Now they print them as people order them. It's brilliant.
I know
there's no upfront cost to doing it, which is nice.
I know several authors who have got boxes, 350 copies of their book languishing in the garage for 10 years. You don't need to do that. I will order them 10 or 15 at a time of each of the copies, just so I've got them in the house.
I used to self-publish comic books, and I've still got boxes of comics in the garage because it was pre-Amazon, and the technology is brilliant, and it just means anyone can have a go. Basically, you don't have to have a trust fund to be able to self-publish, or it's really good.
So what? Making money, kind of it. My background as a musician was I created my own record label in 1978.
Yeah.
Did my 4 albums, sold my albums, but never sold more than like 10,000 copies.
Yeah.
But I knew that once I sold 1,200 roughly, I'd recovered my recording costs and the first 2,000 books. Then I was, from there, it was mainly profit.
So if we talk about this, I've just said about a physical print copy. I don't do physical print copies only. I do ebooks as well. There is a program you can get free from Amazon, a little program you get on your computer that will take this internal stuff that you've got and create the ebook for you. You move a couple of things around, you publish it. That's all there is to it.
What's a physical book?
This is a physical book.
Somebody buys.
No, the PDF that you've done the insides with, you can use to create an ebook as well as this. You don't need to do another copy of it. And there's programs to do it. And again, if it takes me an hour, it takes me an hour. That's all. And it's all free. So we're starting from scratch. We've got these books onto Amazon, one book onto Amazon. It's taken me the time and effort to do it, which I would equate to somebody learning knitting or crochet from scratch. Yeah, it's not hard, but you have to put the effort in. So there's my book. I've got it on my dashboard, and there the two things are on the dashboard, and they will sit there forever and a day doing absolutely nothing. I've got only a time investment into them. You know about music, so there's more than a time investment in music. You've got the recording costs as well. And then I have to do some advertising like this. I have to get people interested. I'm doing shows. I'm putting this up at a show and selling. Did really well at a show a few weeks ago. But I'm also doing online advertising. So I'm doing Instagram and Facebook. And it's up to me to get the enthusiasm in the general public to buy these books. And in terms of ebooks, I've sold many thousands of them. In terms of paperback books, we're nearly up to 1,000, which is not a lot. But when you think that some of the established authors are only selling 500 copies of their books now, because nobody's buying them, we don't aim for paperback books. We aim for paperback books when we come to shows where people can see the physical book and talk to the author. But yeah, so in terms of my outlay, my time outlay, I will never get back. You don't, unless you strike lucky and somebody picks you up for TV. But even then, I was talking to an author on the weekend who is very well known, and he's all over the shelves downstairs. And he said that he got optioned for one of his books for TV, the BBC. 2 years later, they hadn't done a thing with it. So they'd, in effect, optioned it, which means they promise him money, but didn't deliver any money. So everything we do has to be for ourselves rather than a publisher who might do some publication for you, some advertising for you. But even then, an established publisher is not doing anything for authors that you can't do yourself. And they're doing less and less for authors.
I've spoken to an author recently who was traditionally published, and she was saying that she had to pay for her own sort of banners and advertising. And she's published through like a big company, but even she has to do the same amount of legwork that you have to do as a self-published author.
I think there is one thing. I might be being disingenuous and being very, very curmudgeonly because I'm not traditionally published, or I might be right. I think there's one thing you get from being a traditionally published author, and that is their publicity machine that they've got. They're used to sending press releases out to everybody. They're used to talking to Arthur down the corridor who knows about these things. Oh, they're used to talking to Fiona. Fiona's got somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody in BBC. They've got that sort of a network. I haven't got that sort of a network. So I think that's the only thing that you get from being traditionally published that you don't get from doing that.
That's how a lot of them get turned into films and things, isn't it? Like Jurassic Park was optioned to be a film before the novel was even published. There's a lot of that kind of, you've already got the pre-made inroads into things.
But you're never going to make money out of it unless you're one of that top 1%. But even then, they're struggling now. Peter James told me that he's done well. He's a multimillionaire, but his books aren't selling to the degree they were. When Grace came out on the TV, people started buying his old back copies of his books again, but not the new ones. And it's a very difficult market because although there's been a bit of a resurgence in physical reading, people who pick up a book and read it, or people who get a Kindle and read it, it's nowhere near what it was before Netflix. And I'm not a one for being shown this stuff. I don't want the story talked at me. I want to be able to read it in a book and work it out. So no, you won't make your money back.
But you don't have to spend any.
You don't have to spend it,
I found my death as a musician was signing with RCA.
Oh, really?
Label.
Yes.
And then someone's telling me what you need to produce. You're now a production line.
Yes.
And you're selling to a market.
Yes.
And I lost all. Well, I use the phrase being sold out or sold in because you sit in front of a board of people who say, no, it needs to sound like this.
Yes.
And I will say, you weren't in my bedroom when I wrote that song.
And that's it's a fairly personal thing. I mean, the thing about these is I own the rights to these. I've got the intellectual property on them. The ALCS, which is the author's licensing authority, will pay me money every 6 months if anybody uses anything from my books. If I go for a publisher, there are 3 types of publishers. There's me, there's the hybrid publisher, which we'll come to in a minute, and the traditional publisher we know about. If the traditional publisher takes you on, they're probably going to ask for the rights to your book, which is terrible when Netflix come along and want to make the movie out of it, because you have to sit back, grit your teeth and let them do it. Anybody who's watched, say, Grace, will know what Peter James is going through if they've read the books as well. It's financially fairly lucrative, but it's not intellectually fairly lucrative. You've lost control to a degree. Now, the hybrid publisher in the middle, they're the ones that a lot of people go for because it's easy. They're a traditional publisher who takes money off you to publish your book. And people are paying thousands of pounds to do what I did in 20 minutes. I don't get it.
It's a bit predatory, isn't it?
Yeah. And then they will get you to do all the legwork, get you to schlep around all the libraries. They'll get you to do all the publicity and the advertising. Well, why are you paying them all that money then, if you're going to do it all yourself?
That's the brilliant.
Editors and proofreaders are invaluable, but you have to choose your editor correctly. I had a lady who was in the States, and she kept correcting me on UK idioms. And you can't do that. oh, they wouldn't say that, would they? Well, yes, they would actually. You have to have somebody who understands the sort of phraseology that your people have got. Sometimes they don't talk like, well, I talk like a Brummie. I lived in Birmingham for a long time. These guys who talk London, they talk London, and you have to understand London to be able to get their turn of phrase. And they still throw lots of Cockney rhyming slang in. And she didn't know any of this. So you have to pick your editor carefully. And you have to have somebody with a track record, which I have now, fortunately.
That's sort of the one place where a lot of self-published people will pay for a service. So you can do everything free. A lot of people recommend an editor, don't they?
Yeah.
It is one of those things, you can do it without it. You just have to be very, very careful and have a million people who are very kind to check it over for free for you.
There are many types of editors, though. There's the straightforward, have you spelt this right, is the grammar correct editor. It's just the ordinary editor. But there are story editors, there are story development editors, there are character development editors. And so a character development editor will look at the characters and they'll be writing things down about the characters and see if the progression they make or the regression they make fits in with what you've done. So you've got a character arc happening because people have different mood feelings as they go through a book. The story arc is exactly the same. A story has to hit certain pleasure points and pain points for the reader to keep with it. So a story development editor will look to see whether your book has that arc in it. So they can be invaluable because when we sit and write a book, it takes months and we can get kind of snow blinded to the story that's going on. So it's nice to have an editor who then looks at it and says, well, hang on, that's not quite right there. Or why have you even got that in? You don't need that. It doesn't do anything to the story. Take it all out. Save yourself a few thousand words. Oh, I'll kill him off then, okay.
Yeah. How does your writing process work generally? Do you, because I get the impression you're approaching it as a professional. You're like, I've got this series. I need to do X number of books a year in this series to keep it going, that sort of thing. How do you I don't want to say how do you get your ideas because that's the old cliche.
Business face. I used to be in IT. I was a business analyst. I took processes and systems that people had, the way they worked. I went back to my computer, drew some pretty diagrams and told them how it could work better for them to save them money, to reduce the number of people they've got, to get things out quicker. So that was my career. My career was all about analysis of things like that. And I did that for 43 years. My God, 43 years is a long time. And I hated every minute of it, but it taught me a load of skills in how you process things. The one thing it did teach me is get to your desk at 8 o'clock and get out of your desk at 5:30 in the afternoon. Have a dinner break, go for a walk, but you have to have a working day. And so I make the arduous commute from the bedroom there round to the spare room there every morning at 8 o'clock. And I sit down till about 11:30, 12 o'clock. I gift myself a long lunch, come back at about 2 o'clock when the wife's gone off to work, and I sit and do another 3 hours. It isn't all typing words. Some of it is sitting there blankly thinking about what you're trying to achieve, playing solitaire, organising the music file, but all the time you're thinking about what's on the screen. It's important that you do a working day. A book takes me, on average, about a year to create. That's probably 9 or 10 months actually writing it, and the rest of the time is collating it and putting it onto the internet. Some books take longer, some books take less.
Do you have a plan before you start? And do you keep track of your characters?
Two types of people, plotters and pantsers. Yes, I keep track of my people.
Yeah.
I have a character, I have a world, in effect.
A written,
Yes.
so that you don't go wrong.
I use a program called Scrivener. Now, if you're used to word processing programs like Word or Google Docs, broadly speaking, it's a blank piece of paper, you just write onto it. Scrivener's more than that. Scrivener's got a filing system, a binder on the side, and you can put all sorts of things in it that don't necessarily go in your finished product. So I use Scrivener to create the world. And then in the 4 books, that world has traveled to the next book in the Scrivener document. So I already know what color their eyes are. I already know when such and such an incident happened, what car they're driving, where their desks are. I have a map of the room that all the policemen sit in, all the police officers sit in. So I know where their desks are. And they've got a naughty corner. And the naughty corner is basically the one that's right outside the superintendent's goldfish bowl, where you can see them. So I have all that information, it travels with the books. But then what I do for each book is I create an outline. The outline starts with a single sentence, stuff happens. Then you expand the outline to 3 or 4 paragraphs. This stuff happens, then this stuff happens, and then this stuff happens. Then you go on to the full one, which is basically plotting a sentence or 2 for every single chapter you've got. Yeah, a pantser will just start off writing, "It was a dark and stormy night," and carry on until they finish. I can't do that.
It's quite handy in a way because it's like a TV show, isn't it? Where because you're writing a series, you've essentially built the set. So you've got your set, your friend's set or whatever, and then they come in and they have their story in the set that you know, and you don't have to establish the place or the town every single time. Which could be,
Because there's always going to be somebody in a series who's ready to pick you up on something, if one of your characters does something out of character.
Yes, yeah. And you have to think of we were talking about Myers-Briggs. I don't know, that was before we started. We were talking about Myers-Briggs personality tests. So the main guys have got personality tests done for them. I've reversed them so I know what sort of people they are. And you are going to get a situation, if you've read any of the Daly and Whetstones, Daly and Whetstone will argue the toss all the time because they're meant to. That's the point. He's off on one all the time, thinking with his gut, thinking with his head and going off. She's thinking with her heart all the time, thinking, well, the people involved here, why are the people involved? How do the people fit into this? And so they're always at each other. And then there's a superintendent who knows Jack. But being picked up, I've spent an afternoon translating Aboriginal documents for proof of death because I wanted to understand some of the folklore that was around it. And a lot of proof of death actually exists in Australia. I've spent time looking to see whether somebody could make a car trip between 2 places. I've looked to see whether somebody can travel from Washington to the outback on a specific day and how long it would take them to do it. It actually takes 3 days. What plane they would use, who would run the plane when the plane would fly, what the airport looks like, what hire car they can get when they get there. Because somebody will pick you up.
Will know.
I'm sorry, but that day was a bank holiday, therefore the train wasn't running between point A and point B. Well, I know that, so I've avoided that.
there was a lot of that with the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones where people were like, hang on, it would take them 4 days to ride from King's Landing to Winterfell on a horse.
I just imagine having a wall full of all your notes.
Yeah, like a murder board.
But of course, technology now.
I have, yeah. I don't use paper if I can help it, because the problem with paper is you have to sort through it. Yeah. I've got paper on my computer and it sorts through it for me. I just put a search term in and it finds it for me.
It sounds like you've got a brilliant writing system and an organizational system for everything and your research and all that. Mm-hmm. Is this something you had from book 1, or is this something that you refined over the course of writing 6 books?
I've refined it very much so. I'm an Apple guy, so I've got Apple Macs coming out my ears. And so I use all the tools to link everything together on an Apple. They're very good at that. Windows is brilliant at it too, in a totally different way, but I've never done it in Windows. It's all Apple. But yes, I've refined it as I've gone, and I've lost programs I don't need anymore. I've concentrated my effort into learning specific programs. So the pictures are all in, I'm going to say it, GIMP. GIMP is Graphic Image Manipulation Program or something. And it's like Photoshop.
They really need to rename that program.
Yeah, they do. It's like Photoshop, but it's free. And so I've taken the time over the course of the time to learn that program and not try and use anything else. The same with Scrivener. Scrivener it's the ultimate writing tool, but it's difficult to get into. Once you're into it, I took the time then to keep in it and keep using its facilities. I never dabble with Word. I never dabble with Google Docs or anything else. I've concentrated my effort in what I've done.
Would that be your advice then for someone just having a go? Would be simplify. Don't try and use 10 different bits of software. Just stick to the 2 that you need. One for images, one for words.
Yeah. Killing by the Book. When I first started that one, I was in Word. So I did a lot of Word in it, and I found a program called Storyist. Because I'd gone on to Macs then. So I thought, well, Word, I've got a free version of Word. Sooner or later, that's going to run out, and I'm not going to get another one. So I bought $29 worth of Storyist, and I moved the whole lot into Storyist. And then when I got to the end of it, I had to create this PDF thing, and it wouldn't do it. So I was then translating it back into Word so that I could get the PDF out of Word. And that the process of doing that mechanical bit took weeks because I had to get it right. And man, the stress of taking a paragraph at a time, cutting it and pasting it is dreadful, because sooner or later you're going to get something wrong. So being in Scrivener and having learnt Scrivener, it means that I can type to my heart's content. I can edit to my heart's content. I can rearrange to my heart's content. And when I get to the point where I think I've finished, I can go File, Compile. It brings them up the screen. I tick the actual paragraphs that I want, the chapters that I want to put in my book, press the button, and out comes that middle. And that all happens on my Mac in about 20, 25 seconds. So I don't have to worry about that. And the benefit of keeping down to a couple or 3 really useful bits of software is you don't have to worry about it anymore. You know where things are going to be. You know how you're going to do it.
So was have you found the actual writing of the books themselves easier as you go on, or is each book a tricky beast in itself? I mean, like the first time you're writing a book, I imagine, was Killing by the Book the first thing you'd ever written?
No, it wasn't quite the first thing. I've written something called Regaining Lost Ground, and I'm going to go back to that sooner or later. But it rambled. It wasn't organised. I was a pantser. I didn't use the right software for it. It was a mess. And after 130,000 words, would you believe, over 10 years, I decided it just wasn't going anywhere. And I thought we'd do this better. And that's when the Daily and Whetstone one started. So it wasn't the first thing I've written. And it has got better as I've gone along. The problem with all this is we don't know what we don't know. Yeah, and we have to learn it as we go. In terms of the physical writing of it, it's like sticking pins in your eyeballs. It's horrible. Mike at the back there, we're part of the writers group. Maddie, we're part of the writers group. And we have to write 2,000 words every month as a submission. That's quite difficult if you haven't got an idea. So then to come up with 100,000 words of an intricate idea is exactly the same on steroids. And so I will sit for a long time thinking about it. And even on the morning, I make that arduous commute into the spare room. I sit down, switch all the computers on, get my cup of coffee and think, I don't fancy this at all. I really don't want to do this anymore. And I'll open the blind and I'll fiddle with the music collection and I'll press the printer on and press the printer off. And eventually the finger starts saying, come on, get on with it. And so I start doing it, and it's rubbish for 30 minutes or so. And then slowly but surely you start getting into it. And then it's lunchtime and you've written 500 words, 600 words, 700 words. It's one of those things, like everything. If you put the effort to get into it, then you start to enjoy it. Even doing the washing up, you put that off and put that off. But when you do it, it's okay.
So were you writing while you were working?
Yes.
Just sort of in your free time in the evenings?
And in my lunch times and before work and after work. One of the things about commuting, I used to go to Birmingham, to Coventry, to Stratford, to Warwick, to Worcester, is loads of other people are doing it too. And so you're just fitting in with all these other people and driving slowly and everything. Here's a good one. Go an hour earlier than them and sit for an hour in a meeting room that nobody's using at that time in the morning and do some work, do some writing. So I used to write an hour before work, an hour at lunchtime after I'd had my walk, and then an hour in the evening at work. And I never used to do anything at home at all because I'd done 3 hours a day then.
How do you find it now? Do you feel like you're absolutely swimming in time for, because I have to write in that bitty little 10 minutes here and there kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to get in the zone before you have to write trash for 20 minutes before it's any good.
Yeah.
So I quite often don't get out of the stage where I'm writing rubbish.
Yeah, I find it very difficult at the moment. One of the problems that I've got at the moment, one of the benefits I've got at the moment is that I'm not working. The reason I'm not working is because somebody was silly with the IT at work and I said, I don't want to work for you anymore. And so I'm not yet retired, but I'm not working. I'm one of those economically inactive people that the government is trying to get back into work. No, thank you. No, thank you. So what I do is I make that time and go into my office. What other people do is they ring me up or they knock on the door or they get me to do something or they book things in my calendar. And my free time gets absorbed more than if I was actually physically working for a living. So I have to do a lot with diaries on phones and stuff like that to try and avoid my time being taken up just being retired. And I'm sure anybody here who's economically inactive or retired will understand that one's day looks like 12 hours of absolutely nothing, but fills up instantly. So it is a job that I'm doing at the moment.
What was it like the first time you gave someone your writing? So I imagine you came to writing quite late in the game. And you wouldn't have shown anyone your writing before. So what was it like the first time when you were like, I've written this? Because writing's tricky, isn't it? Because if you've made a film, you've made it with like 10 other people. If you have made music with a band, you've got 5 other people in the band. I used to make comic books. There's an artist in the way and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas just writing prose by itself, it's like, I've done all of this. So it feels a bit terrifying and like, if you don't like this is 100% me. I can't blame anybody else.
It's horrible. Like my friend here, I was in a band. I was a bass player in the band, hence the bad wrist. And
you're a bass player as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well done. Yeah, I was in a band for pretty well all my life, in and out of different bands. And we were a group. We all collected the equipment. We all drove in the van. We all put it up. We all played. We all brought it all down. And people would go, yeah, fantastic afterwards. As a group, it was great. But I have absolutely no safety net. And it was very apparent that I had no safety net. And I did hand the book over to people and people read it. And I always use the analogy of, say you're interested in motorbikes and you go to a swap meet and you see a box or two, a crate or two, and it's got a BSA 1962 Starfire 250 in it. And it's a mess. It's all in bits. You take it back into your garage and you spend 5 years on this thing, getting it into perfectly good running order. Shiny, it's all been re-chromed, painted, yeah, it's fantastic. Everything works, all greased up. It's absolutely pucker. And you bring it out your garage, your next door neighbour, and you say, look at this. First time I'm going to start it up. And you give it a good kick and the thing fires up. And he looks at it, he says, well, that's nice. And then carries on with his lawn mowing. That's what writing a book is like. Now, I've invested everything I've got into those BSA Starfires. Doesn't mean to say anybody else is going to like them. And that goes against the grain of my humanity, to be fair. And so I have to grit my teeth. And I've had nobody, except a couple of reviewers on Amazon, who have given me a bad critique. Now, that could be because I had the guy next door mowing his lawn who say, yeah, that's nice. Or it could be they actually like it. But I don't care. What I see is I see the numbers as people buy them. And people keep buying them. Despite this one guy, I'm not going to tell you about it because you're reading it, this one guy who let the whole plot away as a review. and Amazon won't take the review down.
Ah.
And it's a bit naughty, but they keep selling. And if you keep selling your books, you know that people keep reading them. And I've been advertising this this particular event with this particular book, and I've noticed a spike in sales of people buying it.
Oh, great.
That's more feedback than I need for somebody to go, oh, that's nice. What I do get is I get a lot of people and saying, you did this yourself because of all the work that's gone into making it look like a real book. And I've had some books recently. I bought some books off other authors who've done them. The attention to detail in that respect is awful. And you as a reader, you want to pick a book up and not notice those things. You just want to be able to read it. But if you see that the margin is so close to the outside of the book, it looks wrong, and there's no header and footer, no page numbers, then you'll go, oh, I don't want to read that.
Yeah, there's less wiggle room than there is with like film. You make an independent film, and the camera works all over the shop, and you know it all looks a bit dark and scruffy, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I was just going for a vibe. You know, it's just the tone of the film. I was trying to make it look documentary style.
Yeah.
Whereas if your margins are off in your book, you can't very well be like, it was a stylistic choice.
But it's I'm not bragging about this because I'm slightly embarrassed sometimes about it, but it's the way I run my life, in that I've routed the camera wire on my car that looks forward all the way around the headlining and everywhere, so you can't see it. In my house, I've got a network, one of those wired networks, and you can't see it. The TV's on the wall, floating on the wall, no wires coming off it, you can't see them. And I've fitted the burglar alarm. You can't see any of the wires for the burglar alarm, because I make a habit of trying to make it look as inobtrusive as possible. And that's what I've tried to do with the book, is make it such that your focus is on reading this book and understanding this book, not saying, oh God, that chapter can't start on a verso page, it has to start on a recto page. You don't want to see that. You don't want to even think about that. You just want to read the words.
So how many books do you put in a series? 4?
They say a series isn't a series till you've got 3. I will write as many as it takes to do the story. So the Amber Rock is 4 books. It's 2 books at the moment. 3rd I'm writing, and then there's a 4th one to go with it. Daly and Whetstone will run and run and run because they're just a group of policemen solving crimes.
So at the end of each one, do you leave it hanging so that people have to find the next? Because that's what annoys me about series.
Right.
I can never find the first one or the next one.
Amber Rock has to be like that.
Yeah.
The 4 in the Aidan Beckett series have to be like that, because we are developing the Amber Rock theme as we go through. There's also the personal angle to it. The Killing by the Book, Farm, A Natural Selection, and Invisible Murder, you can read them on your own. If you've just, thank you very much if you want to buy a copy, but if you're buying that book, there are certain things in there about the police team that will relate to earlier books, about how Diane Browning ran the superintendent's post, and about what happened to so-and-so and what happened to this guy. But the story is completely self-contained. It won't be hanging. So you know who did it, why they did it, when they did it, how they did it by the end.
Which is exactly the best way to do a detective story, especially when you visit in a library who doesn't often have every book in a series. So yeah.
I picked up a Nick Heron, I think it was the Slow Actors one, in that series, and I was totally lost in it because I hadn't read the first one. And you've got to interview it.
Yeah. I think most detective stuff now is like that, isn't it? Where it's self-contained, a self-contained story with an overarching sort of overarching relationships and that kind of thing.
One of the things we're always fighting in books is the expose. So if you've read Proof of Death and everything that happens in it, you're okay, because when you go, Proof of Life, if you go on to Proof of Death, then you know everything that happened in the first book and you're just continuing the story. But if you haven't, if you've picked it up, I've got to tell you certain things that happened in the first book to remind you of what happened in the first book. And you can do long rambling exposés, and I don't like doing those. Moby Dick apparently has got one. Moby Dick's got pages and pages of description before it even gets into the story. No, thank you. So what I tend to do is I tend to write it into the story as we go along. But things have to change. Midsummer Murders, Cully grew up. So she became an actress. Well, why wouldn't she? That's all they can think of in those things, isn't it? Well, Barnaby had to change. So things do change as they go along, but each of the murders was a discrete moment in time. And I think you've got to give your readers half a chance of getting from one book to the next. Or even, as you say, picking up book number 3 and not knowing what happened in books numbers 1 and 2. Yeah. So if you were to pick up book number 2, I allude to what happened in book number 1, not in terms of the crime, but in terms of the development of the police team. So you know certain things have happened in book number 1 when you read book number 2, but it doesn't go into vast detail about how they got there.
That also is very annoying, isn't it? When you've read the first one and they go, they praise you or they reiterate all this stuff that you now know.
I hate that so much. I don't do it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say, oh, and he remembered back to the time when the house caught fire and blah, 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 and we were all stuck in the house and it was terrible and he only got out by the skin of his teeth and he lost all his good... No, you know that.
But you need a bit of it, don't
Yeah.
you? In case there's somebody that hasn't read the first one.
The trauma of the house fire still hadn't left him.
Yeah.
That's probably all you need to say. And he missed so-and-so so much if they died. But you don't need to say much more than that because it's not your affair right now. It's the affair in the first book. So it's a very tricky thing, blending the two together such that a new reader can pick it up and an existing reader can carry on.
I think you've really nailed the sort of genre expectations of a detective story as well, because people who read crime just like voracious. They read everything and they read them quickly. So they have set expectations of what kind of story they're going to get. They that the solution at the end is going to be satisfying. And I think you've really nailed that. Would you ever fancy writing a different genre? Or are you? I mean, obviously, Amber Rock is a different genre because it's very much in the sort of Ludlum style.
Yeah. I've tried to think of different stories. I mean, I've got 2 more of these books sitting there waiting to be written. But the overarching thing has to be, you've got to enjoy what you do. And so if I'm forcing myself to write an ordinary tale of ordinary folk in a little village in Kent, that's probably not going to run with me because I'm not a tittle-tattle merchant. I'm not actually that good at understanding other people's feelings and such, and you need to do that to write those sorts of books. I wouldn't like to write an everyday story of doctors in a doctor's surgery or anything like that. Sometimes it's stick to what you know.
I've seen a lot of advice online about getting momentum because it's really hard to get sales when you're self-publishing and get known. But now you've got 6 books in 2 different series that, while different genres, they're sort of tonally similar. So people who like Killing by the Book will like Proof of Life.
Yes.
So I suppose it would be a bit of a pain in the bum to then have to sell a book about dragons to the people who have enjoyed books like Killing by the Book.
I've tried. There's a guy I know in a different group who writes books on wizards, and I've read the first book on wizards, and it's a great book. It's a lovely book, and it's got loads of puzzles because it's aimed at young teens. So it's got loads of puzzles in it, and loads of colour, and loads of secrets to find out as you read the books. I can't get into it. I've tried Harry Potter, can't get into it.
Oh, I love Harry Potter.
Yeah, I know. Lots of people do. And this is more about me than you, I'm sure. But there are certain things I can't get into at all. Jack Reacher, you would think, with a guy like Beckett, I'd be into Jack Reacher. Reacher said nothing. He doesn't. He says nothing all the time. He's just some big guy in the corner. And what I've tried to do with Beckett is give him a personality and feelings. He doesn't just break somebody's neck. He thinks about it for the microsecond before he does it. Should he do it? Is this the right way to solve this problem? And he has a phrase, murder is an honest transaction if it's done for a good reason. And he thinks about that every time. If it's just murder for murder's sake, it's a dishonest transaction and people deserve to die for that. That's his view of it. But if it's an honest transaction, if it's a secret agent who's trying to solve a problem and people are getting in his way, maybe he has to kill them. And as long as he believes that he's doing it for the right purpose. But again, Beckett isn't precious about the purpose even. He says, I've got to sometimes take on trust that the people who are telling me to do this job are telling me to do it for the right reasons. It's not up to me to argue their politics or their religion or their economics in order to get my job done. I've taken on the job, I have to do it. Yeah, so it's difficult to understand these people sometimes, even for me to understand them, because they're not me. But you have to get into their mindset and do it. But yeah. So I stick to my specific genres.
Have you noticed, as you've been releasing more and more books, that the sales of the earlier books have taken off? Are you sort of seeing the momentum that people talk about?
Yes, yeah, I am.
Oh, good.
I am. When An Invisible Murder came out, can't remember now, June the 7th, July the 7th, something like that. I did a whole load of plugging. I tarted that book around everywhere I could possibly do it in order to get it in the small public consciousness. Facebook and Twitter and X and TikTok and Instagram, they take so much time, and there's only one of me to do it. But I did as much as I could, and I noticed a big spike in sales at the time when the book was released, and then dragging along behind it. The Farm has always sold. The Farm is a good book, and I say that because it keeps selling. Killing by the Book then started to rise, and then I saw The Farm rise. Then I saw on that people started to buy the previous books because they'd read An Invisible Murder. And it is about getting yourself in a consciousness with people. A lot of writers attack writers' groups. No, you want to attract readers' groups. Writers don't buy books. In fact, writers will not buy your book. They're trying to sell yours.
Too busy writing them. Yeah.
So I have noticed that wave happening, and it's not huge. I'm not a millionaire. I'm nowhere near making enough money out of this, but I'm making money out of it, and I'm getting people interested, and I'm more interested in seeing the figures rise to see how many people are reading the books than I am in the actual cash value of it.
But the brilliant thing about self-publishing is you own them, and you've made them, and now they're on Amazon, and they can live on Amazon, and you don't have to do anything. They'll just be there in the magical shop and just sell. It's not like
but I did
work
do
for
one
hire
thing.
sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
I did do one thing. The tagline to this book on the back says, "A gas explosion in northwest London leaves 2 dead. An accident or something more sinister." Dun, 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 right? Now that is the same line that introduces it on Amazon. I was doing this Christmas video that we referred to earlier, where I was introducing myself and my books with nice Christmas music around it. And I used a different tagline. I said, Bayhurst Grange has a secret. How far will people go to stop that secret being uncovered? And I thought, wow, where did that come from? So what I did was I went onto Amazon because I own the text, and I changed the tagline. So now it comes up with that, and I saw a rise in sales because of it.
Oh yeah.
I'm asking the questions. It's always got to be asking a good question. And that's what gets people to read. And the reason you stay up for an extra chapter is because I've asked you a question that you need to find an answer to.
And the brilliant thing about owning it is you can do whatever you like with it. So if I've noticed working here that the covers, especially in crime, are very trendy. You'll get 20 books 1 month that have all got dark blue and like yellow windows in a house, that sort of thing. And if the trends change, you can change your covers.
Yes.
You can do anything you want. If you can change your titles, you can,
Yeah, you can.
It's completely open. which is amazing.
It's that control that you get. Now, if you've sold it to a publisher, the publisher will have changed your cover for you anyway to what they think it should look like. And they will have probably changed half the text to what they think it should say. And they will change all your advertising and all your black back blurb to what they think it should say. And you say, I don't like that. That doesn't sound right. That's not getting into the spirit of the book. And they'll say, well, yeah, but we're selling it now, aren't we?
Yeah. There's an author who's from Birmingham, called Gillian McAllister, who's got a podcast.
I know Gillian.
And she's very open about how she'll submit a book to her publisher with a title, knowing probably 75% of the time they're going to pick a new title for her. And she's just like, well, that's just how you sell them. But yeah, you don't have that control over your own work in the same way.
What I did for a long time, and I still do it, much to a lot of people's disgust, is firstly I'll walk past Waterstone's window or W.H. Smith's window, and I'll walk straight past in front of the window and then look at it. Which one popped out at me? Which one shouted at me from the window? They don't do that so much anymore because they're all drab and they're all cozy mysteries and teens and rom-coms and romanticises and whatever they are. They're not my genre, but they pop. So if they pop, take a picture of it. And I've got reams of pictures, and I do the same on my computer. Which one pops out at me when I want to design a new cover? But I used to, I don't so much anymore because of the injunction, but I used to go in the shop, and when people were looking at the book, say, what was the first one you looked at? And they'd look at me funny, they'd call a member of staff over, and I have to explain I'm an author. But that's very useful because I don't know it all. I've got to see what other people think. And some of these covers are deliberately based on what people have said. Oh, I looked at that one. Will you buy it? I may do, actually, yeah.
I'm sure I've said this a million times before, but like, I love the story of how Lee Child, whose real name is Jim Grant, came up with his pen name, which was he walked into a W.H. Smith's in a train station, and he was like, right, where's my eye level when I come in? It's on the C authors, so it's got to be a C name, and then I'll be there. I'll be on eye level when people walk into a W.H. Smith. And he's like, it's got to be easy to spell, and then he looked at the covers and that sort of thing. So that idea of just putting yourself in the reader's shoes, walking into a shop and going, right, what would grab them? Like, you don't want to be Roger Zeleny and be like in the Zs at the bottom of the shop.
There are formulas.
See you.
Everything's a formula. There are colour formulas. There are colour wheels. And my fine artist daughter at the back there, she knows about these things. But there are stylistic rules, and they're unwritten rules. And I've got a lovely little diagram on my computer, which I remind myself of quite frequently. And it's a series of boxes. And in these boxes, it says, you will read this first, then you will read this, then you will read this, and you will read this last. And you always do.
That was really handy. You sent that to me, and when I was trying to come up with a cover.
If I put that in front of you, I can guarantee you will all read each of those sentences in the order in which we've just said, because that's how your eye works. So, for example, if I've got a tagline, the Daily and Whetstone Crime Stories, that's not drastically important to you. But the title is, and the author is. If you look at Mark Billingham or Peter James, they've got Peter James in big letters and the title in little letters because they want you to read the name. They don't want you to read the title. They just want you to buy the next book.
Yeah, they don't.
They're more famous than their books are now.
The Arnold Schwarzenegger thing, he was like, why would I change my name? Because Schwarzenegger would look amazing on a poster, and it does. It's like, when he's the star, it doesn't matter what the film is, you're going for Schwarzenegger.
But I'd like to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, I wouldn't. I'd like to be Peter James or Mark Billingham. But I'm not.
Yet.
I'm not yet. No, I'm not trying to make myself anything I'm not. Unfortunately, that's up to you guys to do that. So my name isn't the most important thing on that book. The most important thing on that book is the title. And so the pictures are organised in a very specific way. If you look along the line of these four here, the importance of the pictures is all a third of the way down. There are rules. That's how you're going to look at it. That's where your eye's going to fit. It's, again, the shelf at Tesco's. Yeah, they'll put the cheap stuff at the bottom because you're looking immediately at the expensive stuff. So I've thought about all of these things as I've gone. And it's very important that to understand there are rules in reading as well. There's the setup, There's the inciting incident. There's the gubbins that happens in the middle. There's something called sex at 60. Sex at 60 isn't actually sex. What it is a really exciting thing that happens 60% of the way through the book. And then there's the dark night of the soul. I can't solve this crime. I've got it all wrong. Somebody else has been murdered and it's on my shoulders. That sort of thing's got to happen at a specific point. And then we get into the rallying round where it gets back to a sensible conclusion. So there are rules about writing books. You don't just sit at your typewriter and hammer it away like Murder, She Wrote.
A lot of people are very skeptical about that sort of approach, but I think they mistake it for a template, whereas when you look at where the rules have come from, they've come from people looking at films and books historically. They've gone, right, why does The Godfather work? Why does Jaws work? Why does Star Wars work? And they've reversed engineered the rules from natural storytelling structure that's just always hit.
Yes, yeah. It is a natural psychological way a reader's brain works. And I think I can't remember whether it was you or yourself that said it about, oh, they died. It was you, wasn't it? Yeah. I didn't expect them to die. Yes, you did. You wanted somebody to die. They died. That's pulled the rug from under you, and now you've got to read on. It's designed like that. And it doesn't mean to say that I've designed the whole story like that. It means I've designed basically the flow of the story. It's like somebody saying, I'll design you a new kitchen. You need a washer, you need the sink, you need the taps, you need the plugs. I'm not telling you where they all go. I'm just saying this is what you'll need in your kitchen to make it work.
Does anybody have any questions for Austin at all? Well, I'm aware we'll have to wrap up shortly.
Media cover of authors and books, for instance, like the television programmes and radio programmes about books and about, like, what's it called, Between the Covers?
Oh, yeah. Where it's sort of like a book club on the telly.
Yes, I get the impression that, unless it's something worthy that they've read, they wouldn't, I'd say, well, I read the latest so-and-so.
Yeah, they'd never be like, I'm bringing the latest James Patterson.
I tend to agree. I don't watch them. And the reason I don't watch them is because we've already talked about all those authors and the 1% who make it. They'll always pick a Salman Rushdie book, or they'll always pick one by a famous author, or they'll always pick one who goes to the club down the road that they're in. They'll never pick somebody who's just off the shelf. And that's because they're selling books. It's not because they're there to entertain you. They're there to persuade you to buy these books. And we could argue that Katie Price is the same selling her book. Well, she's making a living out of it. That's what it's for. Loads of people have written books. Loads of people say they've written books and haven't written books. It's a selling exercise. I'm not yet at that point where I'm a selling exercise. I'm not trying to sell you books. Please buy. But they're much better than if you bought them off Amazon. Give you a discount. But that's not the job I'm trying to do. The job I'm trying to do is I'm trying to write books that entertain people. And I think book club programs on TV are slightly different. There's often a pretense at being intellectual.
There's a bias, isn't there, towards away from what's popular, because it's the same in every medium, like in music as well. Like, people sneer at Taylor Swift because a lot of people like her, but she's brilliant at what she does. People sneer at Transformers movies, but they do what they do, and loads of people go to see them and are entertained by them, so they're doing the job.
The tragedy of Liam Payne. We've heard about him in the news just lately. He was plucked from obscurity at about 14 or 15. They formed a boy band. Those big important people, like publishers who controlled him in the band, and he had a great time. Girls, drugs, women, money, the lot. And then they spat him out at the other end. And all of a sudden, all of the life he knew didn't exist anymore. He didn't have a foundation to live by. And maybe that's what contributed to the tragic thing that happened to him at a very early age. We don't know. We can't endeavour to understand what's inside his head. But there is a formula for making money, and they made money out of him. They made zillions of pounds out of him. he was just and also ran in a band. You know, think of Cheryl Cole, Cheryl, whatever you call her, Cheryl Tweedy, whatever she was called when she first started. She's fighting for a career all the time because they've now abandoned her. She's nothing anymore. And so if we get bound up in that whole celebrity thing, then we lose ourselves if we're not careful. I don't want to lose myself.
I may touch on the mundane. One thing that puts me off a book is the font size.
Yeah.
I have trouble with my
Oh, when it's too small.
Yes. If I open a book and it's on,
Yeah.
10-point Roman or whatever. So it could be the best book in the world, but if it's too small, too dense, that's it.
Yeah.
When she lived with us, daughter number 2 had a bookcase. Daughter number 2, this is daughter number 1. Daughter number 2 had a bookcase full of literary classics and full of the sort of books she liked to read. And while she was out one day at school or college or university or just hanging around the street corner or whatever they do when they're kids, I went in her room and I sat by this bookshelf and I just kept pulling books and looking at them. Pulling books and looking at them, pulling books and looking at them, not reading, looking at them and understanding what this book was. And in the front of a lot of books, they actually have the font and the size, Bembo 12 or something like that. So I was looking at that and I was writing it all down. What I settled on was Adobe Garamond 11 point, not 10 because 10's too small, but there's also what's called leading in between the lines. So it's blank space they put, which was actually strikes of lead when they used to print.
Oh,
so it's called leading. And so I looked at the leading, I looked at the paragraph settings so that you knew where a new paragraph was, and I wrote it all down. And I got the best, what I thought was the best fit out of all of those. But yeah, people print large print books deliberately so that readers with poor eyesight can get them.
The day-to-day thing, there's a cut-off for me.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, I hope I'm
the other thing
above
that
it.
gets me, they used to say about Barbara Carter, she always used to do 5-line paragraphs in one time.
Right.
She thought people hadn't got the attention span to read a page at a time. I take one look at that. I'm not saying one paragraph a page long, but if you've got these small paragraphs,
Oh, I'm guilty of that myself.
there is a lot to be said for the way it's laid out.
Yeah.
The mundane nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
Do you remember I said it takes about a year and 3 months of that year was not writing it. It was doing all the other stuff. So on my computer, because I haven't got a printed copy at that stage, what I will do is I will create the PDF version of it and read it on the computer. It's gone through all its editing and everything. And then I will look to make sure there are no orphan words on the next page, because that really riles the heck out of me. And I will make sure there are no orphan sentences. So what I'm trying to do as I'm going along is reduce the number of pages in my book to just the story and no blank pages. Sometimes there always are blank pages because you have to start a chapter on the right-hand side. So if that finishes on the right-hand side, there's got to be a blank one there. But there's another reason for that, and that is that when you get a book printed, they print it based on the number of pages it takes to physically make the book. Each page costs a millionth of a penny or whatever. So if you have a big thick book, because it's got loads of 5-word sentences in it and 5-line paragraphs in it, then it's going to be thicker and it's going to cost more. And one publisher that I went to actually refused my books because they were too thick. Oh, we only have 60,000 words in our book. Those are about 90. Oh, I only have 5 characters. I've got 5 characters. Yeah, but you've not got 60,000 words, have you? Why is that then? And then I worked it out. Whilst it costs me X pounds to print it, it cost them X minus £2 to print it. And they were in it for the profit they could make, not
see that a
the
lot.
quality of the book.
Stephen King books have just been reissued on, like, if you remember the old paper that the yellow pages used to come on, like desperately thin tissue paper, and they just reprinted all of Stephen King's books on those, and it's just like, just to be cheap, I suppose.
I specifically chose this.
Yeah.
I specifically chose the white paper rather than that grainy old yellowing paper that they have in a lot of books. I could choose that if I wanted to, but I just think it's nice to have. It's nice to hold. Yeah.
I think we're running out of time, I'm
Yeah,
afraid.
there you go.
But yeah, did you want to read a short section from
Could
your
do.
book, or
Wherever I put it.
um,
Where did I put the stuff? There it is down there.
Oh, don't know.
Let's just pick a book up, shall we?
Yeah.
As I have one.
I'll have to run off shortly, but
Yeah.
you're all welcome to stick around and help yourselves to tea and coffee and chat to Austin and
I've got a
and
sheet
buy
there.
books.
If you've got email addresses, you want to put them down. I know a couple of your email addresses, but if you want to put them down on the sheet, I do a newsletter twice a year. I don't use it for anything else unless I've asked you first. And you can always unsubscribe because I've been spammed my entire life. I was spammed before the phrase spam came in Monty Python. And I've also got QR codes, which you may want to just photograph, and I'll get you onto the website and so on. Yeah? Where you can have a look at the other books and the other details that I've got on the website. Let's just pluck something out of thin air, shall we?
Okey-dokey.
Yeah, let's do that, shall we? Just guess this bit. So, Bayhurst Grange. We don't know about Bayhurst Grange yet. We know about an explosion that's happened in Green Street in Harrow. 2 people. One of them was a prostitute. The other one was a guy called Andy Mason. Andy Mason wasn't supposed to be there. So we got the police involved. Daly lives not far away from there in Harrow himself. He heard the explosion in the night and thought, well, if it's something to do with me, they'll call me. Went back to sleep and they called him. So he went through the scene and he's trying to figure out, of all the people that are involved, why on earth has this happened to this particular person? They've interviewed the wife. The wife says, well, God knows where he is, but I thought there was something up. And so Daly's got nothing to work on at all, which is always the place they start. They have a few names, a few photographs on the board. They have to work it from there. I don't know what comes in this sentence because it's been 3 months since I read it. So we're gonna work this out as we go along, aren't we? Yeah. Tuesday was always the worst day of the week. Still reeling from the shell shock of Monday with the balance of the week still ahead. In Bilko Bob's day, previous superintendent, Scott Daly always tried to find an inquiry to keep him out of the super's immediate eye line, or a field trip to harass a potential suspect. Superintendent Hacker, however, insisted on Tuesday to hold her catch-up. Catch-up? Catch out, more likely. A tortuous couple of hours to highlight all his failings and sidestep around any successes, pointing out that even those came at a painful cost to the departmental budget. She had booked today's debacle for 1 p.m. and Daly was eager to thwart her by demonstrating some progress on Operation Scion, which is into the explosion. But they had made none. Hannah Mason was still under investigation. A big house, a decent car, and money coming in. Maybe she was content to turn a blind eye until he brought it home with him. Sonia Judd, Mason's mistress, in Hannah's home, right under her nose. Daly found it hard to believe. Friday, the day of the affair, ended abruptly with the first time Hannah knew of it for certain, yet there was still no evidence of her involvement in her husband's death. With their accounts strikingly similar, Hannah, Jacob Foster, and Wilson Hughes, who were his drinking buddies, had spoken before being interviewed. Nonsense about a sale or helping a person in need. Maybe it was one of several alibis which one of the lads needed to be elsewhere. Perhaps Hannah had repeated what Foster had said to her. Who's to know, right? Last Friday, a rapid expansion of natural gas had left Mason high and dry and his friends with a problem. So they reeled off the story and clammed up. Nothing to do with us, officer. Nothing to see here. The card school, hogwash. But again, no evidence of their involvement. So what had happened? Daly ran an eye along the timeline on the incident board, stretching from 7 p.m. on the Friday to 2 a.m. on the Saturday. Judd returned home around 7:20. 10 minutes later, she left, returning on foot with Mason at 8 o'clock. Another half an hour and she left without him. Where did she go? Despite the array of photographs and scribbled annotations, there was still not enough. Too many grey areas. But then, what was he expecting after 3 days? Excuse me. Behind him, the blue swing doors squealed. Superintendent Leslie Hacker scanned the team room, purposefully turning her watch to check the date, the hour, the millisecond, with a tacit command for him to follow her into the goldfish bowl. As he latched the door, the hubbub of the team room gave way to an uneasy silence, and she placed herself in Daly's chair like somebody trying to avoid patches of bird crap on a park bench. How's the homicide and domestic violence report coming along? On it as we speak, he lied. He had yet to write a single syllable. Our chief priority is Operation Scion. Daly lowered himself into the throne of doom, dismayed to be back on that side of the desk, recalling how uncomfortable it was. About that, she began. One of the tabloids has got wind that we're investigating it as a potential homicide. I need to give them something to stop them making it up. She reached down and played with the levers under Daly's chair, raising it to a position of superiority and destroying hours of effort from Daly. There were no similar levers on the throne of doom. Tell them, ma'am, the case is ongoing and we are following up several lines of inquiry. I'm thinking of having that printed on your business card. What, ma'am? No reference to a pithy Bible quote? That makes sense in the book. She stared blankly for a moment. Daly wondered whether she had read the briefing notes. Then she rallied. Frankly, I'm concerned about the lack of progress. Ongoing is not helpful when speaking to Assistant Chief Constable Fraser. The name dropped so heavily that Daly wiggled his toes to check for injury. After the previous ACC, Diane Browning, had disgraced herself, Vic Fraser took the hospital pass of steadying the ship. A veritable sergeant major of a man. They were all assured he would weed out troublemakers and jettison the deadwood. To date, he had weeded out new furniture for his office in Hillingdon and jettisoned some 1960s deal chairs. I'm sure he understands the complexities, ma'am. As an experienced officer, Operation Scion, she parried. Help me understand. A prostitute and a car salesman go into a house in Harrow and the house explodes. Daly stifled a snicker. It could still be a decent joke under different circumstances. What have the gas board said? Nothing formal, ma'am. Their preliminary report shows nothing wrong with the supply. Fire investigation team is confident the explosion happened house side of the meter. Forensics suggests someone turned on a gas ring, allowing the gas to build up and explode when the central heating pilot light ignited. An accident? Hacker sounded relieved. Or death by misadventure, or sheer stupidity. Someone trying to be clever with the cooker. Daly shook his head. They defeated the cooker knob with an elastic band and set the timer to 1 a.m. Few people set the timer to heat the house while they're asleep. Leslie Hacker, though, was not to be defeated. A sex worker, though, she must keep odd hours. She was clutching at straws to preserve her budget. Still, the notion hadn't occurred to Daly. Never underestimate the power of guesswork. Even idiots get lucky sometimes. And, she continues, I don't think Mason was a customer of Judd's. I think, not a customer? Hacker stared open-mouthed for a moment of theatre. He picked her up in town and he walked with her back to her brothel. Daly hoped she didn't use that kind of language in her tabloid briefings. It's not quite that simple, ma'am. As far as the press was concerned, it was. A prostitute and a car salesman go into a house in Harrow and the house explodes. It's sold copy. So tell me how simple it is. What is your take? Hacker lowered her glasses on her nose and settled back for the yarn. Murder, ma'am. What? Both of them? A few more zeros popped onto her bottom line. As well as heroin, Judd's bloodstream contained a lethal dose of fentanyl, which we have yet to account for. Mason was rendered unconscious by amitriptyline hydrochloride, again unaccounted for. Admittedly, Mason could have taken his own life having murdered Judd, but what would you do with the syringe he'd used on her? And why rig the gas explosion to happen after both he and Judd were dead? Hacker leaned back, rested her chin on her steepled fingers and rose to the challenge. Maybe he was covering his suicide. An insurance scam. Daly gave a cursory shake of the head. As soon as Ramesh found the drugs, that was out. Mason would have leapt off a bridge or stepped in front of a train, and nothing suggested he was suicidal. I I forgot you have experience of being hit by a train. Read book 1. So you think they were both murdered? By whom? Daly could almost see a spreadsheet of numbers reeling across her eyeballs as the cost escalated from a fairly inexpensive accident to a stratospheric murder inquiry. Too early to say, ma'am. There are too many loose ends. We should have a clearer picture by the end of the day. Well, I sincerely hope you do, though I won't be holding my breath. More's the pity, thought Daly.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming in and talking to us. As I say, feel free to mill about, have tea and coffee, and chat to Austin.
Yeah.
And as I say, if you've got any questions about self-publishing at all, Austin's your man. We run a writing group here twice a month if anybody's interested. If you fancy coming along, they're dead friendly. And nobody's like left in tears yet.
No.
And yeah, just give us a shout and I can give you the dates for the next ones.
We all have to wear floppy hats and cravats. Okay? It's a must.
But yeah, thank you very much. That was brilliant.
Thank you for all coming. Thank you.
Yes. Oh.
Ferocious reader.